Okay, good evening. My name is Aaron Spring, chairman of the executive chairman of the People's Caucus of Briarcliff Manor, and I welcome you to Meet the Candidates Night 2023. Before we begin, I just want to make a couple housekeeping announcements. As has been past tradition, we are going to pass around this hat. If you'd like to make a donation to the caucus, we'd greatly appreciate it. No pressure on anybody, but we do rely on donations to survive. So if you feel it in you and your generosity to give us a donation, we'd greatly appreciate it. We take checks. Not yet. One more housekeeping item regarding fundraising. We are going to spend the next few weeks getting our candidates on the ballot, collecting signatures, and that will take up the majority of our energy and efforts over the next few weeks. From February 10th, roughly, to March 1st, we will be soliciting former donors, current donors, and pushing to reach our goal for the season of $4,000 to $5,000 in donations. So again, our first priority will be to get our candidates on the ballot. We will then spend time fundraising, and then we will spend that money to back our candidates for their reelection efforts and for caucus business. We have 7 questions tonight that will be asked to Trustee Midgley, Mayor Vesio, and Deputy Mayor Chatsky. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond. Kathy Bhattacharya will be keeping time, and Kim will hold up a 1-minute sign to warn our candidates, as well as a 30-second sign. Should you go over by a few seconds each way, we will be fair and give everybody a few seconds as well. We will go left to right on the first question and right to left on the second question, so on and so on. I like that. Sounds good to me. Sounds good. If you have any questions, there was some paper back there. We'll allow a couple of questions to be submitted, but we did give people a week via email to respond. Some of these were made by the caucus committee. Some were sent in by the audience or the people of Briarcliff Manor. So there was ample community. There was ample chance for the community to have some input. So without further ado, we're going to jump right into the questions. We'll give you a 2-minute introductory statement to start, though. Mr. Chatsky?
To start, I would just like to thank the members of the Caucus Executive Committee for keeping this nonpartisan tradition alive. I thought this year has gone very smoothly. I love that you arranged for it to be a non-competitive race. That just makes everything far easier. I want to thank all the residents who either showed up last week or decided that they were happy with the way things are going and didn't show up. But in any case, thank you for the confidence that you have shown in our board and the willingness to allow us 2 more years to continue on the path we've been on. Finally, I just want to also specifically thank Steve and Ned, Rhea, who's not here, Kevin, who is coming, I think, but is late, for the teamwork that we have exhibited together for the last couple of years. I think we've been very productive. I'd be remiss if I didn't point out they've made it very fun, which is an excellent feature given how much work we've taken on, and there are some days where it's 2 days of work in a day. So I do appreciate the camaraderie. I love after meetings that we all get together and put our differences, if there are any, aside. All have drinks, all are happy. I only have 1 minute left. There are so many more things to say about my board, but I'll just end with that. And thanks for having me here.
Thank you, Mr. Chatsky. Mayor Vesio?
Thank you, Aaron, and thanks to the caucus as well. It's really a great tradition we have here in Briarcliff. Part of the reason why Briarcliff has been so successful. You heard last week some of the things that we're looking forward to do in Briarcliff. You've heard some of the things that we've done. Tonight I'm looking forward to answering some of your questions. And I'd just like to echo Peter's point about the team. Not only the team of the Board of Trustees, but the team that we've helped put in place throughout the village. Several department heads have been replaced in the last 4 years. Many staff have either retired or moved on to other things. And every time we make a replacement of someone, we try to kind of level up and have that person excel or have the potential to be even better than the last person that held the role. And so far, we've had a pretty good track record with that. So I appreciate the opportunity to have another 2 years to serve as your mayor and your support for the March election, and look forward to serving you again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Vesio. Trustee Midgley.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the caucus for what they do. This is it's almost a 100-year tradition. I'm not sure of the exact year, but it's certainly older than I am, which is a good thing. Because, but more importantly, it's been a really interesting 4 years for me, because Peter grew up in a house. Peter was a former mayor. Steve grew up in a household with the former mayor, and I didn't have a lot of background in local government. And because of the caucus and the system and a lot of the issues that I had real thoughts about in what I thought I could offer a lot of insight to, I volunteered myself and got involved in the process, and have been very happy in the things that we've accomplished over the last 4 years. What was fascinating to me is Peter sat around, we have been discussing our accomplishments over the 4 years. And when we look at the scope and the scale of our accomplishments, we've really done a lot. Steve just mentioned a lot about we're dealing with turnover in staff. And we're actually hiring people that are extraordinarily talented. And at the end of the day, part of the reason that I'm sitting here now is I'd like to continue working with what I think is a board that, we have our differences, but at the end of the day, we can bridge those and come up with what we think are good and solid solutions. And for that, I thank the caucus, because if it weren't for the caucus, I think we'd look like the federal government. And thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Midgley. We're going to come back to you now for the first question outside the introductory statements. First question: what is the current status of the downtown mobility enhancement, also known as the Streetscape project, slated for Pleasantville Road? What kind of parking strategy do you support, and how will the village work with all stakeholders to ensure a smooth and efficient process in completing this project?
Wow. This has been something we've been wrestling with for the last 3 years, 3 or 4 years. Right now, every single every single consultant that we have talked with has said that the safest possible configuration for parking, and this is the big issue, I think, is parallel parking. I understand, the great, pulling into a diagonal space is really easy. But backing out is extraordinarily dangerous, particularly at the confluence of 2 lanes of traffic that are all trying to sort of scoot 9A we're trying to get back on 9A or backing up from 9A at the different times of day. So, thank you. So, simple answer is, at this point, and until I can see a plan that shows where we might be able to do a portion of diagonal parking without interfering with the traffic flow, I have to support the parallel parking. I think it's, every consultant has told us that's the thing to do. And lastly, it's probably not the most popular. But if you look at it, Irvington has diagonal parking going into basically into traffic, and it's a dangerous situation. So if you want to look at what something like that would look at, go and drive down Main Street in Irvington. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Midgley. Same question, Mayor Vesio.
Thank you. It's a lot to talk about in 2 minutes, but I'll give you a high-level overview. Streetscape has been contemplated decades now. Last time it was done was 1972, so we're about 50 years out. Where we stand with the project right now, we're at 60% revised drawings, meaning that we've already received 60% drawings. We asked for some revisions, crosswalk adjustments, queuing lane, loading spaces, etc. So we saw 60% R revised plans 2 weeks ago. New York State DOT has granted the village just over $3 million towards the cost of the project to make it safer for pedestrians. As we all know, a lot of pedestrian strikes, a lot of vehicle accidents in the downtown. The project will likely start the end of this year or into 2024. A lot of that is dependent on the grant situation, which is a long, arduous process with the state. But because we're so far along with the design, it should help things to move faster. As far as parking strategy that I support a mix of all types of parking, not just on street, but off street as well. And there's many actions that the board is taking to try to enhance our off-street parking because we're extremely limited curb to curb. There's a choke point in the village. We have a intersection with North State, which is very busy. We deal with the 9A traffic backups. So there's a lot to contemplate. So what I personally support is parking everywhere. Wherever you can get parking, if you can get it behind the stores, if you can create a lot, if you can make it more efficient on the street, I'm all for that as well. We've met with the store owners many times. We had 4 or 5 work sessions here, and we'll continue to meet with people, hear their comments and their concerns, and try to address them the best that we can. It's going to be a little bit of a disruptive project. You're not going to be able to rip up sidewalks in the downtown and have no disruption, but we'll manage that effectively by pre-planning the work, being myself personally very involved with the day-to-day to ensure that we are minimizing the disruption to the businesses. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Vesio. Same question, Deputy Mayor
Do
Chatsky.
you want me to cede some of my time to you or on a roll?
I'm all right.
Okay. I like when residents ask me about the streetscape project, the expression I use is full speed ahead, which is the good news. Bad news is that speed is pretty much New York State speed. As Steve mentioned, we applied for a $3 million grant. We were awarded the grant. They don't just write you the check. So that process is lengthy. It's involved. There's a lot of I's to dot, T's to cross. Our building department has a lot of forms to fill out. Once we get the money, as Steve alluded to, shovel in the ground construction is slated to begin no earlier than October of this year and as late as December next year. I do believe toward the end of the quarter, we're going to start on this project. In terms of managing a large capital project, I think this board has uniquely demonstrated some skill in that area. Tuttle Road is a perfect example of how a large project can be done with minimal disturbance to those impacted, directly impacted. I think we have spent a lot of time looking at already ways to phase this so it's least disruptive to store owners and shoppers, all residents. In terms of parking, we've done a phenomenal job of identifying well over 100 additional spaces than we have today. We're trying to better use the area behind the East Side stores. The Wells Fargo acquisition gives us a whole new lot to work with. We own 3 acres of property that is adjacent to that lot, and all of these present an opportunity to take our limited downtown area and literally expand it probably twice as large as it is today, and I think the entire community benefits from that.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Chatsky. The second question will start with you as well. There are talks that the former Pace University will become a yeshiva. We want to know, what is the status of this project? A quick disclaimer for our audience. Our trustees and our mayor have a fiduciary duty to our taxpayers, and if there is pending or future litigation, they may withhold certain comments to protect the taxpayers. We recognize that. So to whatever extent you can provide a status update, we greatly appreciate it. However, we also realize you are not being elusive if you have to withhold certain information.
I was most curious, you mentioned talks are occurring. Who's speaking? I haven't heard of that. I'm just kidding, of course. So this has been a long-term
Scared me for a
issue.
second.
After last night.
The Board of Trustees had received an application for use of this property. There is zoning that we had put in place well over a year ago, I think a year and a half ago, that changes some of the features of special use permit properties in our village. One of those changes actually affected Pace University, the former Pace University site, so that the yeshiva and their plans to use that property did not meet our zoning code. One of the criterion for special use is that all components of zoning code have to be adequately addressed. Special use permits are acceptable uses under our village code. The threshold for meeting all the requirements for approval is slightly higher than a typical as-of-right use. Because they didn't meet one of the zoning requirements, the building department, not the board, but the building department rejected the application. They're now in front of the Zoning Board of Appeals looking for relief from that denial. And that's where we are today. It's in front of ZBA, not the Board of Trustees, so we have nothing in front of us right now.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Mayor Vesio, same question.
Sure, I'll just pick up where Peter left off there. We are, however, keeping it on our agenda as a courtesy to the applicant so that if they are successful in getting their waiver, then they don't have to restart. We can just kind of continue on with the review process. Just to explain for those who may not be familiar with our special use permit process, especially since some of it is relatively new, we now require a lot of information upfront in order for an application to be deemed complete. Everything from a fiscal impact analysis, a schools analysis, environmentally sensitive feature analysis. We want all that upfront. We don't want to get it piecemeal as the process goes on, so it drags out for 6 months or a year. We want the residents, we want the board, the consultants to have it all out there as soon as possible. Some other features of our special use permit process is that when a completed application comes to us, in addition to declaring our notice of intent to be lead agency, if that is our desire, we also refer to the planning board for an opinion, so that we're getting the planning board's opinion very early on in the process. If they have a concern about something, we're going to know about it. We can address it early on. We're not going to wait anymore until it gets the site plan approval after the special use has been issued for the planning board to deal with that. If they have concerns, we want to hear about it right up front. And then, of course, on every special use permit application, we are holding a public hearing, usually many public hearings. And we want to make sure everybody is aware of what's happening. So a sign is required to be posted on the property anytime something is before any of the boards. All the materials that the board is getting, other than privileged information, is posted right on the website and attached to the agenda. You can just click the link. The board has taken great efforts to really push the information out to the public so you don't have to search as much. The more people that are aware, the better process we'll end up with.
Thank you, Mayor Vesio. Same question, Trustee Midgley.
I think Peter and Steve have outlined sort of where the board is on this situation fairly well. Obviously, it's a complicated matter, and it's the current status right now is that the building department has denied their use, and for right now, that's sort of where we stand. And I don't it's a really sensitive matter, and I think you guys did a great job at outlining where it is. I don't think I have anything to add to it. And what I'd like to suggest is that I not make any more comments and not get myself in trouble.
Thank you, Trustee Midgley. We're now going to start with Mayor Vesio, as was your suggestion, Trustee Midgley, for the third question. This is almost a perennial question, and I think it's an important question. Are there any services that you can think of that can be consolidated between the town of Ossining and the village of Briarcliff? Furthermore, what are your thoughts on establishing a coterminous town and village of Briarcliff Manor through the annexation of election districts 17 and 20, as has been talked about in the past? Mayor Vesio?
Sure. So there are some services that are already consolidated between the town of Ossining and the village of Briarcliff Manor, namely tax assessment. We also get to enjoy their parks, which we wouldn't get to enjoy otherwise. That's pretty much it. Briarcliff for a village compared to a town is pretty standalone. Most of the time you see the town provide the majority of the services. In this case, it's the village. And the same goes with the village of Ossining. They probably have upwards of 30 IMAs with the town of Ossining, everything from court to police. The villages do provide the majority of services in our area. And to me, the town is an extra layer of government that is costing additional taxpayer money. It may not be needed in the form that it currently is. However, huge lift. The last time there was a town village was Mount Kisco in 1978. The board has been working on this. We do talk about this at just about every caucus that I've been at. We have taken steps. We've brought in tax assessment consultants because don't forget we have to deal with the issue that the Mount Pleasant section, about 10%, is not at 100% valuation like the rest of Ossining. That presents a challenge. We have to first analyze what would the tax implications be. The easiest way for this to move along would be for the two villages and the town to be in agreement of what would happen. And we're kind of far from that at this point, even having those discussions where we can proceed forward. There is a new town supervisor that was recently elected. We have a relatively new mayor in the village of Ossining about 2 years ago. So I'm hopeful we can kind of reinvigorate those long-term discussions and how we can make government as efficient as possible and cost the least amount of taxpayer dollars. So a lot of work to do, but we are trying to push that big, massive boulder ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Vescio. Trustee Midgley?
One of the big issues that, we've seen a lot in the last 2 or 3 years, and I'm going to be a little bit more specific on it rather than the big picture that Steve was. Well, first I'll comment that we would very much like to see a consolidation of services in some way, shape, or form. The biggest concern that we've had, and it's had real impact on the village of Briarcliff's taxpayers, is the town of Ossining controls the assessor's rolls, the assessment rolls. And there have been negotiations and continue to be negotiations and continue to be appeals that with different entities that have with different entities that have protested their property taxes. And what we've seen is, I'm going to try and put this as nicely as I can, that there have been opportunities availed to the tax assessor's office to minimize the impact on all taxpayers, and frankly, they haven't been taken advantage of. And it has hurt the village of Briarcliff, and it's hurt the village of Ossining as well as the town. And I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you, Trustee Midgley. Deputy Mayor Chatsky, same question.
As Steve alluded to, this is a heavy lift. There are only really two ways where the town-village combo can be done legally. And the way I think Briarcliff has tried to pursue this in the past has been almost a non-starter because getting a referendum on a ballot where we're just a minority of the potential voters there is a hard lift. Especially, I know there is a feeling among some Briarcliff residents that on a tax basis, we are in some ways subsidizing other parts of the town. So I think there's no incentive for a large chunk of voters to allow us to secede from that game. The biggest advantage to me, if we were combined, for one, we would stop getting emails from residents that ask, what is the town doing about blah, blah, blah? The average resident has no idea that we're a village and there's a town and those are different things, and clear up that problem. While we are separate, I would love to continue to push a little harder that maybe our police department could be providing services outside of the immediate village boundary. That's a contract that seems to go by default to the Village of Ossining Police Department, and I think we have put an awesome police department in place. I think if we could share that wealth a bit, it would be great. I think the other thing I would just like to pursue while we are separate is to get more Briarcliff Village representation on the town board. I think we have been woefully underrepresented for as long as I've lived here. And, you know, that's close to 30 years, 20 some odd years. It would be nice to have sort of a more stronger voice right on that town board.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and we're going to stay with you for the fourth question. In 2019, many villagers enthusiastically backed this ticket because of their stance on what are now the former B-zone properties. Many villagers, myself included, are thankful for all that this board has done to stop egregious residential development. But our question is, what is the status and plan for the now rezoned CT properties? Deputy Mayor?
So we've had a mixed bag, mostly successful, I think, on the CT zone properties. We had a data center that was functioning before all this took place that is continuing to thrive, and it's a perfect use in this village, generates a lot of property tax revenue. Demands on municipal services are very low. Obviously, there are no school kids living in that data center, so it's win-win all over. I think the biggest clear victory is we took what had been a long dormant building, is it 600 Albany Post Road Street, the former Sony headquarters that had just sat with no use at all. We came out with new uses, we tweaked those uses over time. It is now scheduled to open as a high-end wine storage facility. Again, it's going to be very low traffic. It's no impact on the schools. It's great tax revenue. Neighbors are thrilled to have this use. Total win. A third CT property continues to sit dormant as the owner doesn't seem to care so much about what happens to that property. There is 555 Pleasantville Road, which is mixed bag. I think the property changed hands recently, in part, I'm guessing, because the property is a little more valuable now that it has more, there are additional chances for uses on that property. So some of this is, oh, and I left out the solar farm, which is the last one, I'm sorry, which is a pending application. Again, we took a pretty long dormant property and it has faced already two potential uses that we have seen come to life, one of which is now in front of the board.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Mayor Vescio, same question.
One of the things that this board did to try to encourage more development in our commercial zone, which only represents 5% of our land is zoned commercially, is offer tax incentive. So that if you come and improve a commercial property with $50,000 or more, and your taxes go up as a result of that improvement, the value of the improvements, say there's an extra $50,000 in value, will only hit $25,000 in year one. And then an extra 5% each year for the next 9 years until you get to the full impact. So it's just a little way to try to incentivize. We allowed for a lot more special uses on these properties, depending on if they were on a main road or not a main road. And there has been a significant amount of renewed interest. A lot of not only applications, but people calling to the village hall, asking about the property, what can be done there. And that's something we haven't seen in decades on these properties. Some of these have been vacant for a while, and it's unrealistic to expect that they're going to get reoccupied overnight. It's a process, and it's going to take time. We're fighting with COVID, post-COVID impacts, people working from home, a change in the way we live. That is also going to impact how quickly this happens. These properties did not get built, well, 5 of them in a year, and they will not get reoccupied within a year. It will take time, but it will happen. And you're seeing it already, as Peter mentioned, with the Morel and a couple of the other properties changing hands, that you'll start to see some more action. What some of these properties ultimately be, that is to be determined. But with our limited commercial land, we do really have to make the most of it.
Thank you, Mayor Vescio. Trustee Midgley.
I want to follow up on just what Steve was saying at the end there. We have very little commercial land in Briarcliff. And, you know, commercial land is wonderful because they tend to be the highest taxpayers and have, let's just say, they use less services, particularly with regard to the schools, than most other uses. Part of the reason, you know, and I'm going to get specific again like I've been doing all night, but I live next door to Morels on two sides. Two sides of my property abut them. And I was, when you know, when the whole thing, when this whole, at one point they were discussing putting a self-storage facility, and that's right on Route 9, you know, between, you know, on the east side of Route 9. And long and short, we were told that unless you do a residential project there, nothing will ever happen. Well, lo and behold, a year and a half later, we got Morales as a potential tenant, and we worked with them to help them get their special permit through, you know, no more so than we would have done with anyone else, but it seemed to be the perfect use. They needed the building at the same size, and it was a, you know, and for those of you who don't know, Morels is a fine liquor establishment and that's based in Rockefeller Center right now, and will be, and their storage facility was, their lease was coming due, and they chose this site. Everyone, every consultant, every attorney that has been in front of the village said, you're never going to find a use like that. We found a use that kept it commercial, and I think what we're going to find is for most of the rest of the spaces, we will find commercial uses that will be advantageous to the village and minimize the use of local services.
Thank you, Trustee Midgley. We're going to stay with you for the fifth question. Please provide an update regarding Briarcliff Manor's trails, green spaces, and parks, as well as your vision for what you would want to see in those green spaces, parks, and trails. Finally, what is your favorite green space in the village?
It's a wonderful question. This village and this board has done a whole lot of work in, you know, since we were elected in terms of improving our green spaces, our trail system. COVID, you know, in the midst of COVID, we think our trail spaces and the work that we invested into them in terms of expanding trailheads, in improving trails and access. For a lot of people in the middle of COVID, we had the best trail system of any village I know, and we put a lot of effort into that. We had an app that was done that highlighted all of our trails, and I'm forgetting, Peter, you may know
the hiking project.
The hiking project. And it was a phenomenal thing that I think we all did when we were all shut-ins. And I think having that, you know, having that outlet for a lot of our, you know, a lot of our fellow members of the village allowed us to, you know, be a little bit more healthy and a little bit everything else. My favorite trail is probably, you know, it's not that much in the village, but it's the old Croton Aqueduct Trail that goes into Rockwood, partially because it's in my backyard, and also because it's, you know, once you cross over that into, and that's the one last thing I'll say, the interconnectedness of our tiny little Briarcliff trail system that will go into the North County Trailway, formerly the North County Trailway, that for bicyclists, when we get that addition done, the old Croton Aqueduct going into Rockwood, and also around Pecanico Lake, that also goes into the Rockefeller Estate and their trails. We have a phenomenal trail system.
Thank you, Trustee Midgley. Mayor Vescio, same question.
Sure. We could talk about parks and recreation in Briarcliff for about 2 hours and not get through it all. For a small village, we really have a lot of stuff going on for recreation. And we have taken a lot of efforts in smartly upgrading this, doing it in an efficient way, using DPW to minimize costs. One of those projects is actually ongoing right now, which is at the youth center. We're cleaning up the second floor, opening up some of the walls, redoing the kitchen, making the bathroom ADA accessible so that that space will be a little more welcoming than it is now, and certainly a lot more functional. Chilmark Park, we were way ahead of the curve. We installed pickleball courts that are quote-unquote Florida quality, and they are known around the county already. We were one of the first to install pickleball. They're one of the nicest, and if you go out there today, almost 2 years later, they still look great. A lot of interest. People have really been enjoying that. Chilmark Park, we've fixed up the basketball court. We fixed up the backstop at the baseball field, which has been there as long as I remember. And those are improvements that really didn't cost a lot of money. Long term, we have a lot of big projects ahead of us. Our pool is over 50 years old. It's time to start thinking about redoing that and maybe separating the kiddie pool from the larger pool because they're on the same filtration. It's not really allowed nowadays. We're grandfathered in. We need to do something about our indoor recreational space. It gets cold here in the winter. We don't have any indoor space that's large enough to accommodate an event like a gymnasium, as an example. So we need to kind of plan for that and figure out where it could fit in our village. We are limited with our land. As big as we are at 5.5 square miles, a lot of steep slopes, a lot of wetlands, land that's not under our control. There's really only a few spots to look at. So that's going to be a big challenge going forward. My favorite park or green space in the village, I love Chilmark. I think it's great because it's got so much space. But I'll go with Scarborough Park, which we also fixed up and stabilized. It's just cool that in Briarcliff, we can go down to a spot on the river and see the bridge and see the city and watch the sunset. And it's very tranquil and it's very relaxing. I like it down there.
Thank you, Mayor Vesio. Deputy Mayor Chetsky.
Way to mention Everett Park, leaving me with nothing, by the way. I think the trails themselves are a perfect example of this board's approach to solving long problems in the village. All of us were enthusiastic about trails. We all thought they were greatly underutilized. So when we came in 4 years ago, first thing we did is updated all the signage for all the trails. We started using an app that was provided to us free from REI, a outdoor sporting company. They created an app that allowed individual trails to be mapped by users. So the more users on a trail, the more data there is. That hiking project app records things like length of trail, navigates every curve of a trail, tracks elevation. There's a spot to put in whether there are bathrooms, whether they're dog friendly, whether there are spots to look out for. It's been very successful. We got very lucky in a weird way that COVID hit. All of a sudden, everybody was looking to spend more time outdoors, and we had just done all this work on the trails. We kind of hit the jackpot there. I'm going to speak a lot quicker. Scarborough Park was another example of something where the approach had been, let's renovate due to poor erosion of the side. We were looking at $1 million expense. Instead, we did it in-house. We got design work done for free. We got DEP work done for free by a local resident. We did it, I think the total cost was under $100,000 for phase one.
105.
105, you're including tax. But a deep discount from the $1 million we were looking at. Chilmark Park had been for a long time on the capital plan as a $5 million capital requirement. We spent about 100, I think it was 80 actually, putting in pickleball, cleaning up overgrown areas with invasive growth, new backstops. That was a cheap hit. And all of a sudden, basketball court we redid, got a lot of use. So we look for these little hits. If I had to pick a favorite, how much time do I have?
Yeah.
Probably not
I'll
enough
cede my time to
pick
Peter.
just one favorite. I do love the change we made to Scarborough Park. I think that is a great area. I would like to see us use the water a little more in Briarcliff, and if there's a way to develop some kind of cantilever structure above the water as a launch for kayaking and boating events, that would be ideal.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and I love the basketball court, so thank you for that as well. Chilmark
You're
looks
welcome.
great. We're going to stay with you, Deputy Mayor, for the next question. Please provide an update to the safety issues regarding 9A. What would you like to be done to see? What would you like to see done to address safety? What is your vision for a safer 9A? How would you work with the state to get a safer 9A?
obviously you're asking the right person first. I am known among village residents as Mr. 9A. 9A is really my bailiwick. Sometimes on the board, we like to spread the assignments, so I've ceded some of this to Steve. Just today at lunch, I was supposed to have lunch with my friend Lance McMillan, who most of you know is the regional director of New York State DOT. He couldn't make it, I suppose, because of the 287 disaster today. But what was the actual question here?
What's your vision?
Right. So we have, I'll tell you my responsibility, because I know Steve is going to want to talk much more about this. But on the board, my mission here was to corral all the residents to actually, 9A is obviously a New York State road. We can't really do anything on this board without New York State really contributing and actually taking an interest. So we all worked together to corral residents. We automated the process by which they could simply click a button to send emails to a whole bunch of involved parties at the state level. It generated very quickly hundreds of resident complaints to the proper people at New York State. And I think that was instrumental in getting attention, allowing us to open a door so that, honestly, Steve, the mayor, could pursue one of his longtime favorite areas of interest to make a difference in the safety for all of Briarcliff residents. I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to allow Steve to talk about that. But I do think this was a great group effort. And not just this board, I'm talking about all the residents of the village who contributed time to address this problem and get some attention, which was badly needed.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Mayor Vesio?
As Peter will attest to, I'm always ready to talk about 9A. Even if it's not the topic of the meeting. It always comes up with any leader I'm with, whether it's County Executive Latimer.
Hey, you're from Briarcliff.
I have had meetings with the governor's office regarding this. We sent our first letter in July of 2019, just a few months after going into office. Several press conferences later, many emails, many letters, meetings with senators, assembly people. The state finally agreed to fund the $3 million study. That's starting next month, hopefully, done in less than a year. It's going to identify things that we all know are deficient. Some of the things, my vision for a safer 9A, a better 9A, it's a parkway right now. They're letting trucks on a parkway. They took a parkway, made it a throughway, but didn't change anything. So you have insufficient drainage installed in the 1920s. Part of the reason why the Tree Streets floods, I think a big reason. You have narrow lanes. You have a center guide rail, which is constantly on the ground because it's always hit. Only a minute left? Oh my goodness. So we need a safer barrier there. We need wider lanes. We need to pull off a shoulder so that if somebody breaks down, they're not in the lane. Safer on and off ramps. We need to get rid of the 3 lights. There are 2 lights that we have. There's only 3 lights between Ansville Circle to the north and Elmsford. Traffic backups, traffic accidents, and most importantly, the bridges. We gotta have bridges that trucks can fit under. That's common sense. You can't have a roadway that trucks can't fit under. And a lot of those trucks are hauling county garbage. So even though the state owns the roadway, the county owns all the land outside because the Briarcliff Peekskill Parkway was built through county land back in the late 20s. So those are the features I'd like to see for a safer 9A. And to be honest, I'm keeping my fingers crossed that nothing bad happens until we get to that. And I know my time is probably up, but past the study, something that we are pushing for already is the funding for the construction. It's going to be a several $100 million project, and that's going to require funding probably from beyond the state and to the federal level. So we're already working with our state representatives, and now we have some federal representatives now that are in touch with us through some recent elections. So we'll start pushing on that next, and I hope in the next few years you could see construction underway. That would be great.
Thank you, Mayor Vesio. Trustee Midgley?
I'm going to ask Steve a couple of questions, for my time. Steve, how much money was allocated recently by the state to make a study of what's going on in 9A?
$3 million.
$3 million. Okay. Has that ever been done before?
No.
No. So, in order for the state to build something, what do they have to do?
They have to do the corridor study first, which is why we've been pushing for this study, because the corridor study determines the deficiencies, and it will actually also come up with some solutions. It obviously studies environmental features as well. The good part about that is once they have that study, the state's now on official notice of deficiencies. So they kind of have to do something sooner or later, and most likely sooner.
And with that study and having something like that on the shelf, if there were opportunities for monies from the state or the federal government, what projects get named?
The ones that have plans ready to go.
The same shovel-ready jobs, correct?
Yep, usually.
Fair enough. So I think what you've heard from this village is, from the trustees here, is 4 years ago, this is one of the first things that we started on. And Steve really spent a lot of time on this, as did Peter. And 9A, all you have to do is drive up from Elmsford, and you'll see, there's a new Amazon facility built there that is absolutely huge. And that traffic goes up and down in 9A. It's large trucks. Steve hit all the important issues about most of the important issues about the deficiencies. The only thing I would like to do is, we have a village that has 2 nines in it. We have a 9A state road, and we have a Route 9 state road. Both of those roads have issues in terms of traffic. And, particularly over the last, 5 or 10 years, we have seen significant backups on Route 9, backing up over 3/4 of a mile. So what I'd like to say is 9A is the real issue right now in Briarcliff, but we're going to have a secondary issue with Route 9 and 9A coming up at some point in the future, and that shouldn't be forgotten.
Thank you, Trustee Midgley, or should I say Counselor Midgley, given your questions. Thank you. All right, that is the extent of the debate questions, but we are going to do what I'm calling a lightning round, which I stole from ABC during the gubernatorial debates. This is just a 1-minute round to allow your constituents to put a personal touch to the quote-unquote politician. Even though all of you are community servants, in my opinion, and not politicians, we're going to ask you some personal questions just to personify you, if you will. Starting with Trustee Midgley, and then just going all the way down. What is your favorite book?
Favorite book? Oh, God. I'm going to pass, and you can come back to me in 20 seconds.
Sounds good. Mayor Vesio?
You think with the amount of stuff we're doing in the village, I have time to read something other than village agendas?
You can go back to your childhood if you'd like.
I'd say my favorite book, if you're going to go back to the childhood, is going to be The Giving Tree.
Thank you, Mayor.
I like that book a lot. It really exemplifies kind of how we should live.
Thank you, Mayor Vesio. Deputy Mayor?
4 years ago, when I returned into local government, a friend gave me Running for Office for Dummies. It sits on my coffee table. I'm thinking it was a joke, but it's a joke I love. I spend a lot of time reading MUTCD, which all of you know is the Manual for Universal Traffic Control Devices. Did that for Steve. And I spend a lot of time reading New York State DOT's functional class listing. Something I find fascinating, and I would encourage anyone doing any work within the village to check them out. It's just so everyone knows, it's actually how roads are defined throughout New York.
So it's a dictionary.
Just fascinating stuff.
What I'll say is, I won't say it's my favorite books, but the last 2 books I've read, which much to the chagrin of my 2 children, I just reread Winds of War and War and Remembrance. And that's something like 1,200 pages.
Wow.
And written by Herman Wouk, and just a fascinating history of World War II.
Thank you. Next question, starting with Deputy Mayor Chatsky. What's your favorite dessert?
Asking me to pick one. I do have a bit of a known sweet tooth, so you know what? I love Briarcliff Baking Company baked goods. I like Dunkin' Donuts. I'm trying to think what else is in the village I should be highlighting. I like desserts at Dive Bar. I like Patio has a nice little.
But what is your favorite dessert?
Oh, I see what you're getting at.
Pie, cake, donuts?
I like yodels.
Yodels. Mayor Vesio?
I like a nice ricotta cheesecake.
Trustee Midgley?
Ice cream.
Starting with Trustee Midgley now. Just a couple more of these. Dogs or cats?
Both.
Excellent answer. Mayor Vesio?
Dogs.
Deputy Mayor?
Wow, tough one for me. We have 3 adopted dogs at home. We've been fostering kittens ever since COVID began. So I have 5 cats at home, kittens at home right now, a mama cat.
And they're looking for homes? Is that correct?
They are. We place them. So
Okay.
it's one of the things my wife loves to do. And I've learned that cats have value. Before I was an all dog person, but now I just like pets.
Sounds good. Favorite musician or music video of all time?
Wow, of all time.
Of all time.
You know,
This is harder than the actual
So,
village
there are
questions.
a couple of answers here. I mean, I like music video. I was like old enough to remember when they came out. So I'm also old enough to have forgotten which were my favorite back then. But I love anything Springsteen. I love Willie Nelson. I like a whole range of music. I like swing music. I have a wide range.
Thank you. Mayor Vesio?
I can't remember the last time I saw a music video. MTV used to have the countdown, but that was decades ago. Boy, my favorite music video. It's tough to even think of.
Go with Thriller.
That is a good music video. Similar to Peter, I do have a pretty varied interest in music. I like everything from country to rap. A lot of alternative. I really enjoy Red Hot Chili Peppers, especially the older stuff. And I like the old music too. I kind of like it all.
Springsteen, old music.
Kind of like it all.
Kid.
Trustee Midgley?
Well, I'm going to skip the whole thing about videos because I don't watch them. But probably my favorite band right now is Warren Haynes is a Westchester resident. His band Government Mule.
Thank you. And final question of the lightning round. One person, no explanation. If you could have dinner with anybody in history, alive or dead, who would you pick?
Susan Chatsky.
Great answer. Mayor Vesio?
One person alive or dead. I'll come back to me. I need a minute to think about it.
Trustee Midgley?
Tough question.
Yeah.
Only because I read an article on him today. Alexander the Great.
Interesting answer.
I'd probably enjoy a lunch with Albert Einstein.
Thank you, Mayor Vesio. Okay, that was fun. I like the lightning round. It keeps us on our feet. All right, now to conclude, please take 1 minute and give a closing statement as to why we should enthusiastically back you this election. Trustee Midgley?
I think if you look at the sum total of the work that we've accomplished over the last approximately 4 years, you will see a depth and a wealth of accomplishments that I'm not sure any other who have, certainly no other board I've been involved with has done. We have done more things. We had a 4.5 hour board meeting last night on a whole slew of issues. I'm not sure you can point to a lot of boards, and I will defer to the experts in the audience where we had 4.5 hour board meetings. And lastly, the accomplishments, and I think at some point they will get disseminated out to the general public. We've done a whole lot of stuff, and I think with a fair amount of cohesion with the board, and Peter said it early on, I think some of us actually like each other.
Thank you, Trustee Midgley. Mayor Vesio?
So, not only what we've done is why you should enthusiastically support us, but you should enthusiastically support us for all that we will do. And we can't tell you all of those things today because we don't even know all the things that we're going to accomplish in the next 2 years. But what I can tell you is that this group is incredibly dedicated. They work hard, and nobody complains when we're sitting there for hours. Everybody puts in the work, and they're working hard for the village. And don't forget, we're not compensated. We're all doing this because we love Briarcliff Manor. And over the next 2 years, we will continue to work as hard as we have been. We will dig into every issue. We will fight hard for the residents, no matter who we're going against, whether it's Con Ed, New York State, whoever. We're Briarcliff Manor, and we're going to fight hard for us.
Thank you, Mayor Vesio. Deputy Mayor?
I would appreciate the continued support, mostly because I think at this point in the village's time, it's most important to keep this team together. I think the board is an extremely well, highly functioning team. I think all the pieces fit very well together. We each bring individual talents to the board, which ends up with a board that as a whole, I think works. It's a little cliche. We work better than the sum of our parts. We make each other better. We push each other. We're very competitive with each other in terms of things that help the village. Who can do more work? Who can stay up late? Who can get Al to laugh? Al, our cameraman. We have these little competitions among ourselves that I think in general benefit the entire village. I've enjoyed this. I think I would love to keep this going, and I think we're on a great path. And as Steve says, more to come. Stay tuned.
Thank you. Thank you to Deputy Mayor Chatsky. Thank you, Mayor Vesio. Thank you, Trustee Midgley. We appreciate your time tonight. It is my honor and pleasure to enthusiastically back this ticket for their reelection. Our next step as the caucus will be to get you three on the ballot, and that will take place over the next couple of weeks. Getting on the ballot is no easy task. We have to go out and collect signatures. We need roughly 100. We are aiming for 200. So if you'd like to collect signatures, please reach out at peoplescaucus@gmail.com. We will also be soliciting our past volunteers to get signatures as well. I will go out myself into every election district in the village of Briarcliff, 7 election districts. I've planned it out, and I will enthusiastically back you as chairman. Again, I appreciate your time tonight. We will get you on the ballot, and we will keep moving and keep progressing as a village. So thank you and good night.
Point of order. Shouldn't the secretary cast one ballot for the slate?
We did that. We did that last meeting. Thank you. Yeah.
That's correct. You did that for the caucus executive committee. You didn't do that
For the village slate. Okay, I'll ask the secretary to please come up and just cast a ballot for the slate of candidates for the village board. Thank you.
All right. I will, is it a motion? I say it again, please.
Motion for a resolution.
Motion for a resolution for this slate of candidates. Thank you, Keith. Thank you, Aaron, for a second. All in favor? Aye. All right. Congratulations. Okay.
All right. Thank
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you.
Just to make it official.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Aaron. Good job.